So today's webinar, we're talking about donation acknowledgement. So my assumption is that you've either been doing donations for a little while, maybe you saw my webinar last week on donations, or have checked out the tutorials. So I'm not going to be covering the donation process itself today, just the acknowledgement process. Um, what I will recap is at the end of entering a donation, specifically when you enter them individually, you will be asked a question of whether or not you want to acknowledge it now, later, or to skip entirely. So when we actually get into the donation acknowledgement process, I'll let you know where we would start in if you had picked the now option. If you had picked the later option, then basically the entire process is what you'll go through. So where I want to start today is talking about salutations. So within a record, you may have noticed we have some fields for salutations, and you may have wondered what these fields are for. So what these fields are for is donation acknowledgement. So let's go into Abby Normal. Let's actually edit Abby Normal, our guinea pig for most days. And let's talk about the salutation options. So salutation allows us to both broadly set up what our default salutations are, how we address people in our donation acknowledgements, and gives us the power to individually specify how people want to be addressed. So we're going to get to the defaults in a minute, but let's just start with the fields. So we have formal salutation for an individual, we have informal salutation, and we have household salutation. So in this case, let's start with formal and informal. Let's actually give a little bit of extra information for Abby Normal. So Mrs. Abby Normal has a formal and an informal salutation, and you get to choose what these will be. So let's say she has specifically said, when you address me formally, I want you to address me as Mrs. Normal. But informally, you can just call me Abby. And so this allows you, for letters, to use that formality or that informality that she has specified. So that's formal and informal salutation. Household salutation does require that she be in a household relationship, specifically with a spouse or partner. So let's go ahead and quickly create a spousal relationship. It's household with Mr. A Parent. So let's go ahead and save that so it updates. And so what household salutation is it lets you say, how do we address them as a household? So every family is a little different. Some people like a more traditional, some people like a more modern salutation, some people like very informal, some people like very formal. So in this case, we get choices. So we have all of these permutations of their names. Since in both cases we have prefixes, those will get into account. And so we can decide that, well, in this case, a parent, their first name is just A, so that's going to look a little strange. And they have last names, so that also makes it even stranger. So as you can see, the system can handle different last names. If they had been the same first name, this would have said something like Abby and Adam Normal, or Parent, or what have you. But since they have different last names, you can specify that. And you can even, where is it? Reverse them. So you could say, if you want to put the male first, or one partner before the other, you can specify that. So depending on how you like to handle it, you can specify that. So we can be very formal and go Mrs. Abby Normal and Mr. A Parent. So if you go by the old Victorian style of putting the woman first for social correspondence, you go with that, which, by the way, that is where it comes from. It is an old Victorian tradition. If anyone's ever wondered why a lot of correspondence have the wife first, that's why. And then business tended to put the male first. Yay, Victorian England. At least I think that's correct. That was the last time I think that's what I read. So let's go ahead and use Mrs. Abby Normal and Mr. A Parent. So now we've specified individually how to set the preferences. But you might be wondering, well, I don't want to have to do that for everybody. That would be a pain in the butt. So for that, we have a default salutation option. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Anybody else hearing like what sounds like a heartbeat? I like the weird, anywho, on the audio.
Yeah, I can hear it.
I know it's been there since the get-go, and I'm kind of not sure where it is. Makes me think a Pink Floyd album's about to start, but I guess I can just ignore it. All right, so let's go ahead and go to Configuration, Default Salutation. So this is where we get to configure the default salutation. We already actually skipped ahead to contact preferred salutation, but this is where we're going to talk about how to set the preferences for the entire system. So as you saw, we can set it individually, but if we want to set a default for the system, then we can do that under configuration default salutation, and then we get to pick it. So what is our formal salutation? What do we want to use as our default formal? Do we want to get really formal and go prefix, first name, middle name, last name, suffix? Or do we want to just do prefix last name? So Mr. Metzler, Mrs. Normal. So let's go ahead and be a little bit more robust, and let's use prefix, first name, last name. And then for our informal, let's go ahead and use first name. And you can even use nickname, which I believe if you use nickname, it will, if there is no nickname, it defaults back to first name. So for those of you who keep track of nicknames. And let's go with a household salutation of, let's go for the whole shebang. So let's do that one. And then we can also set this for organizations. So just as we did it for an individual, we can set it for an organization. So when an organization makes a donation, we can set the preference. And so you might be wondering, well, organization names and organization names, what else can we set? Well, we can also pull from the primary contacts information. So you might decide that formally you'll address the company. You'll put the company's name, but informally you'll use the the primary contacts, first name, last name. So you might decide to go formally nonprofit easy, informally Mr. Shaw, which is our owner. Um, so that's how you can set the organization preferences. And then once you set your preferences, we have one other choice to do. And chances are you're just going to leave it as a default, which is basically saying for those people who we have not set a default for, let's set a default now. The second option is update all, which basically says even if we've set it, let's override it. You probably don't want that option because if you've set some, you don't want to, you don't want to override what people have told you. So let's leave it as the default option and go ahead and save. And so now, throughout the entirety of my demo system, there is a default salutation for every contact. So now I don't have to risk it ever being empty. So any questions about salutations before we move on to templates, which I know a lot of people, this is probably going to be their most interested topic. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Probably the only thing that I can think of is, can this citation system also for the prefix handle things like military ranks?
If the military rank is, well, okay, that's kind of a yes-no. Military rank, I believe, is usually would be handled in the prefix or suffix of the person. Unfortunately, we don't have prefixes or suffixes for military rank at this time. Although I do have a request in for a whole bunch of them for an organization.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, yeah. So it's kind of a yes-no. If we had the suffixes or prefixes, wait, so yeah, so that would be a prefix. If we had the prefix for military rank, then they would be available in salutation. I'm actually trying to get it so that you guys can set whatever you want for your prefixes, but that is yet to be implemented. So hopefully for the future. So
okay.
yeah. So let's move on to templates, and this is where the real fun starts. So before we can acknowledge people, we need templates. So we're going to go to Communications, Manage Templates. And these templates are basically your acknowledgement letters. They have they'll have placeholders which will fill in the information per donation, but they're, thank you for donating to the blah blah organization, your donation amount placeholder, so on and so forth. So these are your thank you letters. This is where you get to create your thank you letter. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and use my pledge acknowledgement template, which I had previously tinkered with. So as you can see, this is a pretty straightforward letter. Logo here, some company information, and I can fill in, and we have some placeholders. So let's actually play with some of these placeholders, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the editor. So for example, right now it just says month, date, year. These aren't placeholders. So what I would like in this position is for the system to actually fill in the current date that I generated the letter. So for that, I can use placeholders. And so we have placeholders for a whole bunch of things, including the salutations I just mentioned. So we'll come back, we'll use those in a moment. But what I want to use at this time is the placeholders under date. So I'd actually like it to say, what are we at? June 6, 2012. So current month date, month name. So that will fill in for June. So I click where I want it to be. I select the placeholder. I click add. It adds it in. So now it's going to say June, day of month, 6, go to the end, space, and current year. Enter. So now it will say June 6, 2014. Why did I think it was in 12? Wait, we're actually on the 12th. Never mind. Wrong day in my head. I was looking at my watch wrong. Anyway, so yeah, this will say June 12th, 2014. And then we can say, how do we want to, salute them? Salute, salutate, anyway, how do we want to address them? So dear, what? What do we want to say? Well, this letter is going to be used for individuals. So this is where sometimes you're going to need different templates for different things. So this particular template is for pledge payments because we have all these placeholders for pledge information. So you're going to probably create a handful of different templates, probably one for individuals, one for organizations, maybe, and then of those you might have variants for gift donations, in-kind, pledges, grants, so on and so forth. So you'll probably end up with maybe about 10 different donation acknowledgement letters, depending on how fancy you get and what your organization needs. So you can keep things really simple and not need that. And a way to solve the problem of not needing individual versus organization is the fact that actually we do have this. So let me backtrack. You don't need different ones for individuals and organizations anymore because of how salutation works. Because remember, we had formal salutations for both individuals and organizations. So if I say dear, formal salutation, for an organization, it would put in, I think right now, the organization's name. And for an individual, it would put in the individual salutation. Now that being said, if you want to use household, that's not going to apply for organizations, and so you'll need to create different templates. A couple other fun placeholders you use involving names is first name and full name. So first name will put their name, full name will put their full name, regardless of what you put for salutation. But the fun thing here is you may remember from when you enter a donation, you can specify soft credits. And so what we can do is we get to choose when we do our donation acknowledgement a little bit later on, if we are going to do a single letter for every person who is soft credited or a merged household letter. And so if you decide for the merged household letter, first name will actually say Eric and Taylor Metzler. Eric and Taylor. As opposed to if I did single letters, it would just say Eric. So some of these placeholders have a bit of intelligence to them. So if you use first name or full name, they will actually fill in all the donors involved in that letter, as opposed to salutation, which would just give you the primary donors. So you get to kind of choose how you want to use them. If you always merge households or just like to address the household in general, then just use household salutation. So anyway, in this case, let's go ahead and use informal salutation. Go ahead and add that. And then we have more template placeholders. The most important ones for you are going to be the ones under donation. And so specifically donation amount and donation date. These are going to work for every monetary donation. So if it's a gift, it's a pledge, it's a grant. This donation amount is what's going to show you that dollar amount. So you're going to need to make sure to have that one. If you're doing a in-kind donation or an auction donation, you will not use this placeholder. You will go down to either in-kind auction or in-kind. So for your in-kind donations, you're going to want to use description and value instead of amount. For in-kind auctions, you will use in-kind auction. Now, an important thing to know about in-kind auction is because a person can purchase or donate multiple items in a single donation for an auction, this will be a table. It will not be like a single entry because we don't know how many donations there's going to be. We don't know, basically that's it. We don't know how many donations there'll be. So we don't know we wouldn't be able to create individual placeholders for individual items. So it's going to be a table. It's unfortunately unavoidable, due to automation and all that. So just making sure you're aware that in-kind auction will be a table. some of the other placeholders of interest in here for pledges and grants, um, while the donation placeholders, where am I? I'm lost in here. Here we are. Donation placeholders will tell you about the individual payment of that pledge or grant. Pledge grant will tell you about the overall status and information for that pledge. So pledge amount will tell you basically the total. How, if they agreed to pay $5,000, then $5,000 is the pledge amount. If they've currently paid 1,000 of that, then pledge received. Total pledge received is what they've paid so far. So you can kind of see here how those have been used. Total pledge, amount paid, amount remaining. And then we use those placeholders. And we can even say what their installments will look like. So that's placeholders. They're going to be kind of the key to making your templates functional. The other part of it is actually making your letters. So any of you who have worked with the newsletter editor or any of the other editors in the system, this is basically the same editor. So love it or hate it, this is what we got. It's an HTML-based editor. So if you're feeling inclined, you can go to the HTML and tinker with it. I'm a big fan of doing this at the very get-go to build a structure with tables so that, we can have a structure something like this. So we have headers and then a main body. And it's even got a footer, but I haven't actually worked with this one that closely. So if you ever need help getting a template started, just getting the basic structure for your first template, just shoot us an email here at support. We actually have some code written up that we can just paste in there for you. In fact, I probably should have, did I put it in the outline? I didn't, but I will in the future. But other than that, you can just use this like any other editor in the system. If you want to bold something, highlight it, hit bold. If you want to center it, you can insert images, you can make links. So it's pretty straightforward. And I'll actually show you later how we can start fine-tuning it for the printing or emailing options that you want to use. And we'll talk more about optimization when we get there, because there will be some comments on that front. So let's see, okay. So along with the actual template, we have template name and category. So template name is exactly what you think it is. It's the name of the template. So it should be something clear that makes sense to you. Donation acknowledgement pledge. So I know this is a donation acknowledgement template for pledges. But in addition, we can make categories. So if you want to, or if you have a lot of templates, you can start organizing them into categories. So put all your pledge ones in one category, all your gift in one category, or you could break them up by program or what have you, if different programs have different letters. So let's go ahead and make a category called pledge. So placeholders, categories, template name. So any questions about about working with the template? I know this is usually where people have the most trouble. Okay, so like I said, if you ever have any questions or any trouble with templates, feel free to let me know, and we can go ahead and help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and save what I've done, and we are actually going to move into, well, not quite yet. Let me go ahead and go back to the list and show you how you can search by categories. So, and other things. So if you have a whole lot of templates, maybe even more than this, we have a search option, which will actually search against the name. And you can go over here to the templates categories and click on the categories that you've created. So if I just want to see pledge, I can click on pledge, and it will show me all my pledge acknowledgements. So, okay, hold on one second. Okay, yes. Sorry, that was my coworker who's also doing a training. So that should be a little bit better now. Okay, so that's to acknowledgement templates. So let's actually start moving towards the acknowledgement process. So let's go to communications, donation acknowledgement. And so what we're going to see here is the acknowledgement history. And we're going to talk more about that near the end. But at the moment, what we're interested in is doing a little bit of pre-configuration. There's only really two options that we're going to be configuring. So we're going to go over here to the right and click on Configure. And so we have two options that we can configure, the start date and the combined soft credit donor setting. So the start date is especially important for those of you who may have recently migrated to Nonprofit Easy and whom we may have moved in a lot of donations. So if you've got donations that go way back, you probably don't want to acknowledge them anymore. And so what you can do is you can set a donation acknowledgement start date. And so any donation from before this date will be hidden by the system. They still exist. You can still go back, change this date and go back and acknowledge them. But chances are, if they're from before you migrated to Nonprofit Easy, you don't want to see them. You would just assume that you've already acknowledged them, and you can set a start date. So if I was to move this up to 2014, it would show only things from 2014 and forward. The other setting is what we do with soft credit. So by default, every donor will get their own letter. And if you want, you can set it so that the default is, normally they get a separate letter, but if you want, you can set the default that you combine soft credit donors in the same household into a single letter. Most folks tend to use that one, so that's probably what you're going to use. But if you have a batch that you don't want to do that, you can still change it per batch. So this is just a default setting that you can still change when you do a batch. So let's go ahead and stick with combine, and we can save. So any questions about these settings or how to make use of them? Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the history, and let's actually start the acknowledgement process. Oh, so how does it combine the letters is the question from Mary. So what it'll do is basically it just combines the names. So if Eric and Taylor have both made have Eric has made a donation and soft credited Taylor, Taylor and Eric would get two separate letters. One letter would address Eric, and the other would address Taylor. So that formal salutation field, or first name, or full name, would just say Eric or just say Taylor. Now, if we combine them, we can use the household salutation more readily for one, and first name and full contact name will now have both names. So only one letter will show up to be acknowledged instead of two. And depending on the placeholders we used, we'll combine names. So instead of saying just Eric Metzler in the first name placeholder, it will say Eric and Taylor. I said Metzler, didn't I? If it said, it would normally just say Eric, it will now say Eric and Taylor. If I use full name, instead of saying Eric Metzler, it will say Eric and Taylor Metzler. So it's a placeholder, basically. And so instead of physically having two letters, it combines it into one entry, and the placeholders, first name and full name, will now take into account that both names will be on this letter. And it will basically make it so that you can start using the household salutation, which is probably what most of you will want. So I should even be able to show you when we go select contacts. So let's go ahead and start an acknowledgement process, and I should be able to show that to you. So here we are in communications donation acknowledgement, and we are going to start a new batch. So we're going to come over here to the right and click on Send Acknowledgements. So this starts the process. And so our first step will be to select whom we want to acknowledge. Which letters do we wish to acknowledge? And so we get some sorting options here. The default is to show you gifts. So maybe we don't want to see gifts. Maybe we want to see pledge payments. So we can switch to pledge. And this will show all of our pledge payments, because as mentioned before, pledges should probably have a different template from a regular gift donation. Same with in-kind, auction purchases, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So right now we're combining. So I'm going to go back to separate, and I'll probably get, let's see, I'm at 16. I should get a few more letters in here. So there's at least there's one new letter in here. Let's see if I can find it. Unfortunately, I don't know which one it is. Here we go. So here, Adam B. Ross, soft credited Christopher Floor. So they're going to get two separate letters. If I combine them, there will be only a single letter for Adam B. Ross. Ta-da. And I will no longer have an individual letter for Christopher Floor. And if I use, say, contact full name, which I didn't, in my template, it will now say Adam and Christopher. It'll say Adam B. Ross and Christopher Floor, as opposed to separate letters, which would just say Adam B. Ross and another letter that said Christopher Floor. So I hope that should answer the question. If not, let me know. And we can search by other things in here. So if we wanted to filter down so we only see certain programs, I could type in arts and culture here, hit enter, and I'll only see that program. So if I only want to acknowledge that program, maybe I have a special letter for that program, I can select just that donation. In this case, I actually don't want to do that. I want to see them all. And we can also sort by the donor type. Is it individuals or organizations? So if you have different templates for individuals than from organizations, you can do it that way. We can sort by date. So if your letters change at a certain date and you're just kind of trying to catch up. So we have a couple of sorting options, and we've also got some requests in to get additional options. So let's go ahead and start the acknowledgement process. So we're going to do a pledge because I want to use that template. And so our first step is, well, is there anybody in this list that we've decided we don't want to acknowledge? Maybe we acknowledge them separately. Maybe they hate getting letters from us. I don't know. So let's say that Nurav, we've already acknowledged him with a handwritten letter. So what we can do is we can select his name and we can skip his acknowledgement. And it will have us confirm. And so what skipping an acknowledgement is basically saying we have no intention of ever acknowledging this person from within Nonprofit Easy. It will show up in their communications history that this acknowledgement was skipped, and you cannot undo it. So that's why I have a big caution on the outline, because if you skip an acknowledgement, it is permanently skipped. There is not currently any undo button. So let's go ahead and skip it, and his name and this donation will be taken out of the list. Now that isn't to say that he will never be acknowledged for any donation, simply that that particular donation is being skipped. So if he was to make another pledge payment, that pledge payment would still end up in this list. So it is a per donation letter skip. So don't fear it too much if you do need to use it. How do you know if someone has already been acknowledged? If they have already been acknowledged, they will not be in this list. So skip is only really used for people who have been acknowledged outside of Nonprofit Easy or whom you have decided not to acknowledge within Nonprofit Easy. If they have already been acknowledged through Nonprofit Easy, they simply won't be in this pool of donations to acknowledge. So you can make a fair assumption. Actually, you can make the assumption, not just a fair assumption. It is just true that if they are in this list on this screen of select donors, they have not been acknowledged within Nonprofit Easy. And so it is safe from the point of view of Nonprofit Easy to acknowledge them. Now, like I said, if you have acknowledged them outside of Nonprofit Easy, that's where skip comes into play. So the other question is there a way to make a note that they have been acknowledged outside of Nonprofit Easy and have it show in their record? Yes, but it's a little finagly. So there's two ways we can do this. One way I've seen is people will skip the donation and then add it in as an interaction or task. I'm not a big fan of that way, but you can do it that way. The other way is to actually go and generate an acknowledge for them and just don't print or email it. So if you've got a bunch of people that you acknowledge outside of Nonprofit Easy, you can go ahead and select them. It doesn't matter what template you pick, just go through the process and at the very end hit done printing. Don't actually print anything up. And basically you've tricked the system into thinking that it acknowledged them, but in fact you acknowledged them outside of the system. So it's a little sneaky, but I like that because it'll show up like any other acknowledgement in their communication history and removes them from the list cleanly. Otherwise you have to skip and use interaction and task. So it's up to you which one you like. I'm a bigger fan of just making a fake acknowledgement, basically making a batch that is for all intents and purposes you acknowledging them, but you don't actually print anything. So I hope that answered that question. So let's go ahead and start acknowledging. So here we are, we have some pledges, and let's select a bunch to acknowledge. So let's acknowledge these 6. So we've selected our folk, we're not skipping anybody, and we go ahead and click on the select template. So this takes us to the next step, where we select our template. If you had entered a donation and picked the acknowledge now option, you would go straight to here. So it would assume that you've already picked that one person for select donors, and will take you straight to this step. So yeah, that's the difference between the two processes. I'm a bigger fan of doing it in batches. One, because then you don't have a whole bunch of stuff in your history, and two, you can do it all at one go. You, instead of going through this process like 5, 6 times, you basically only go through it once. So I'm a bigger fan of doing batches. So let's go ahead and select our template. So we are doing a pledge, so we're going to use the donation acknowledgement pledge template that I created. So let's go ahead and select that template. And here we go, and we get to do the setup for that template. So we've already created the template, and we've already edited it. But this is where we get to do some fine tuning. So our first, hold on a second. See if that helps a little. There we go. So first thing we want to do is, what is the name of this batch? So the template name is going to be the default for the name of the batch. But let's say you want to give this batch name a bit more detail, so you kind of know what was meant to be in this batch. So maybe you picked, all the pledges for a certain program, and so you might say that these are the arts and culture program pledges for the name of your batch. And so that's what's going to show up in our history. If you don't care to give it a name that you can distinguish one batch in a day from another, don't worry about it. So next, we actually get to do some previewing. So if we want to see what it looks like by email, we can put our email in here and send ourselves a test email. And so the placeholders aren't filled in yet, but you can kind of see this basic structure. So I recommend it. Send yourself a test email, and then that way you know if you need to make any adjustments. Further, I kind of skipped things. Well, we didn't talk about editing yet, but we'll talk about editing in a second. Further, if you want to try out one of the printing options, you can actually try them out. So we have 3 printing options: printing HTML, PDF, and Word document. Print HTML is, for those of you who've been with us for a while, is the old way we did it. We actually basically open up a new window in our browser, and we print it straight from the browser. This had certain drawbacks in that there's certain inconsistencies when you print from a browser. Browsers will sometimes put the URL in, so you have to do a lot of tinkering there. Certain browsers didn't behave very well when it came to page breaks. So although it's still an option, it's not the best option. The next one is PDF. This is the best option in our opinion here at Support. It is the most consistent format. It is going to be the most consistent with what your emails would look like. So if you just want to make one template for email and PDF, you can do that. If you want to create one template for email, if you want to create a template that looks good in email and in maybe say Word, you're going to have 2 different templates because they're going to be different. And I'll talk more about Word in a second. So we recommend use PDF. It is the most consistent format. PDF readers are the most consistent in how they work, and you can be basically guaranteed that what looks good in your PDF viewer, which is probably going to be Adobe Reader, will look good in your coworkers, which is once again probably going to be Adobe Reader. But even if you send it to someone who's not using Adobe Reader, because the PDF format is so consistent, you can be pretty darn sure that what looked good in yours will look good in theirs. So this is pretty handy if you want to have your executive director print them up and sign them. So you can just you can just generate it and email it to the executive director and have them sign it and print it up, and you know that it's going to print up okay with them. So we recommend PDF strongly. You may have noticed. The last option is Word doc. So we were asked to provide this at one point, but we don't recommend using it. So the reason why some people like it is because after you generate the document, you've printed it up, you can send it to some like your executive director, and they can make edits to the letter. That being said, you can make the edits from within Nonprofit Easy before you even print them. So it kind of makes that step that kind of superfluous. That being said, some people still like that. But the downside is that Microsoft Word is really inconsistent with its formats from one version to another. So you may optimize your template to look really nice for you, but it might look terrible for your coworker. And even more so, here at Nonprofit Easy, we have one version of Word. Actually, we have several. And so we might help you and make it look good, but in your version, it's going to look different. So we don't recommend Word because of inconsistencies between versions. So I myself am using Windows version of Word 2010. My coworker has the Mac. You may have 2007. You might have 2014, and so it's going to look different because every time they put out a new version, they change their under the hood formatting. So I don't recommend using the Word option. I recommend PDF. So what about if you want to make adjustments? So this is a great screen to make adjustments because we can go ahead and edit the template, and we can make adjustments. So let's say we need to add, oops, I forgot to put my name. Name Eric Metzler. And so I'm going to change this to Sincerely. I think that's spelled right. I'm the world's worst speller. There. So sincerely, Eric Metzler. Okay, we made this change. And so what we can do is we actually can save this to our templates. Don't change the name. And then when we save, we can override the pre-existing template. So now that template has been adjusted. And then if we want, I can go download PDF and see what it looks like, which let's go ahead and do. So our PDF, we have a lot of right margin. So now I can go back in and edit. And since it's a margin issue, I'm going to want to switch to HTML and change this to, because I know 700 is actually a better margin, change the table width to 700, save to my templates, save, confirm I want to overwrite, and download PDF. And that's a lot better. A little less, I mean, I could probably go to 750 if I wanted to get an even tiny, slimmer right margin, but I'll be happy with that for now. So this is a great way to fine tune and optimize your templates. So when you're going to create templates, get your bulk template, get the text in there, get your placeholders in place, get the structure you want. And then when you're actually in your first acknowledgement, then you can fine tune it and get it to how you'd like it. So any questions about the screen? About the setup screen and fine-tuning templates before we move on to the actual generate acknowledgement step, where we can actually make some more personal notes and things like that. That's okay. If you know nothing about HTML, yeah, there is support for that aspect. So feel free to, when you want to set up your first template, you don't actually need to do any HTML, but I just find it easier to set up the tables for the layout in HTML. So a lot of times folk will send us an email saying, hey, I need this format, this kind of basic layout. I need a header, I need a left margin, I need a body, and I need a left column and a body and a header. And we actually we've done it so many times, we could do it in our sleep. We can put it in place for you, put in a couple placeholders just so you know where to type, and then leave it to you to fill in the details from there. And then, I like to teach people a little bit of HTML just so they can do a little fine tuning on their own. And as you saw, doing things like margins is literally as easy as switching to HTML mode, changing one number at the top, switching back, and you're done. So, yeah. So if you do need help with the structure, we're here to help you on that one. Not everybody knows HTML, but it's not as frightening as it seems. It's actually it's a pretty easy markup language to learn. And you only really need to know one or two things if you even want to know it at all. So it isn't required, and support's here to help you with that. Anybody else have any questions about the setup screen or working with the templates? So next. So next is our next step. So we hit next, and we get to the generate acknowledgement page. And so this is kind of an important page, and we have some decisions to make here. Some of them have been made for us, so we don't need to worry too much. The first thing is this is where we decide how we are sending our letters. So based on the communication preferences, which I probably should have covered at the beginning as a reminder, but anyway, depending on the communication preferences in the contact record and what they have in their record under communications, will determine how we can send it. So if someone's preference is send mail, it will automatically send mail. If they have an email and it is marked send email, they will have that preference checked. So in this case, this person has both preferences checked, so we can choose which one we want to use. If someone has neither, so they have neither an email nor an address, they will have neither checked. So our only option here is either to remove them from the batch, delete them from the batch, should say remove, in which case it puts them back in the pool and we can handle them later, or we can just force it to print, in which case we have no address for them at this time, but we can pull that up later. Or write it on the envelope manually, which some people kind of like the look of that. So send email, send mail. This is where we determine what it's sent by. We get a preview of what their preference is, but it will also mark what, if they have an email preference, then that will be available. Now, if someone does not have an email, it is not marked for communication, or it is not, they don't have the send email preference checked, you cannot designate the email option. So if I try to check this, the following users do not have verified email addresses. So this basically means, I don't know why it says verified. It doesn't matter if it's verified yet or not, but it means that we do not have an address for the person to send to. So I can't check that. So once you've checked your options here, let's leave it as is. I'm okay with that. We have send email and send mail. We have, as I mentioned, remove from list. So this delete option. So like I said, what this will do is if you accidentally added somebody to a list, or you realize at this point that you can't handle them right now, you need to put them in a different batch, you can delete them, remove them from this batch, and it will add them back to the pool, back in step 1, to be selected at a later date. So delete here is not to be confused with skip. It is simply remove from this batch. And let's say you want to put a personalized note. So Missy Singh here, we ran into at the grocery store, let's say, and we had a nice conversation with her. So we may want to mention that in our thank you letter, just to kind of personalize it. So we can mouse over that letter, hit edit, and at this point, it will have actually filled in the placeholders. So here we get even a preview. So like I said, June 12, 2014, and thank you for your donation of blah de blah on blah. You currently have paid this amount towards your $1,000 total and have blank, should say remaining. And here's all the details, and you have 6 installments. No, I used that wrong. Oh well, helps when I pay attention. So I might want to add a personal note of, well, I have sincerely in there twice, so I have to fix my template there. It was good talking to you at the store, something like that. So you can add personal notes right here within Nonprofit Easy to individual letters after the templates have been generated into letters. So this kind of makes that word option a bit superfluous. So if you did want that capability, you can do it right here. So any questions about this screen before we actually email and print acknowledgements? Okay, move from list, communication preferences. Okay. Alrighty, so now we've gotten pretty far along. We've edited our letters, we've determined how we want to send them out. Now we get to actually send them out. So we're going to go next, and it takes us to step 5, send acknowledgement. So the first thing is this send by email tab. And so from here, hold on a second. We can, put what we want to have the sender name. Oh. Yes, So since I did have some people marked for both email and mail, they will both get an email and a printed letter. So generally speaking, you probably wouldn't want to do that. I only did that for this example so that I have more on my screen to work with. So, um, so yeah. So if you do check send mail and send email, they will get twice, which you may like. Maybe you want to send them both an email and a mail. I could see a certain logic in that. Maybe some people want to get their acknowledgement a little quicker and keep it on the hand in their email, but they still want that physical letter and the formality of it being signed for their financial records that they put in their, filing cabinet or their safe or whatever. So yeah, send email is our first option, and the only things we really have to do here is say what the sender name is going to be. So this would be probably either maybe your ED's name or maybe your organization's name. So let's put non-profit fit easy. The sender email. So if they hit reply on their email, like want to say thank you for the acknowledgement, or there's an inaccuracy or something, what email address will it go to? So I could put support for this case at nonprofiteasy.com. There's a S in there. And then the subject line. And so this is going to be important. It should be something so they know what it is. Thank you for your donation, or a special thank you from blah blah organization. Thank you for your donation. So make sure you don't get sender name and sender email reversed, or they will fail to send. So now that we've put the sender name, sender email, subject line, we just go ahead and hit send email, and the emails have been sent. Now, since it's my demo system, those probably just went to dead email accounts. So now that we've sent our emails, we have no more emails to process. So if you see this, we go ahead and go to send by mail. And so now what we get to do is we get to print. So as I mentioned before, we have the 3 printing options. I'm a big fan of print download PDF, so let's use that one just to show how the letters, how they came out. I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and here's the first letter for Brian. Here's the letter for Adam B. Here's Alfred when he's not helping Batman. Another Adam B, Arat, Missy, and that's all. That's all of them. So each one will be an individual page that you can print up separately. And what's more, we can print envelopes. So this is kind of a fun feature. So click on print envelopes. And for those of you who've, well, okay, I'll get back to that. So do you want to return an envelope? So if you want your return address to be put on the envelope, go ahead and hit yes. This return address is is being pulled from the information in the settings, in the organization info tab in the settings link. So, hello, oh, that's right. There we go. So here we have envelopes. So just go ahead and set up your printer to take envelopes. That's usually by putting it into landscape. Landscape? Give me a second here. Landscape. Yeah, you put it into landscape orientation and physically configure all the settings for your standard size envelopes. And here you have Nonprofit Easy's been, organization information's been put to the top. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, and then it fills in the address from their record. Brian in this case didn't have one, but that we expected that. So like I said, the information it pulls for the return address is pulled from the settings tab, settings link up here, so that you know. And unlike the old way this worked, so for those of you who remember the old system, the moment you printed, it basically said, okay, we're done. At this point, it does not do that. So you can print PDF, say, okay, I don't like how it went, go back, come back, forward again, print envelopes, try it again if you need to, try a different printing option. And it's not until you hit done printing that the system goes, okay, you're done printing, I will record this into their records, and they will now have the record that they've been acknowledged. Acknowledgement is done. Done printing. So any questions about that process? Nobody? Making me nervous, y'all. I like questions, if it makes you feel better. Okay. Well, so what's happened at this point is those acknowledgements have now been recorded and sent out. And I'm imagining that you've printed it and actually mailed them, and it will show in their acknowledgement history. So when we finish up, before we finish up today, I'll go ahead and go into the communication history for Adam B. Ross, and we can go ahead and check it out.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So, if I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but so it marks them as having received that donation, received acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
Can we, if we want to resend it, or
Yes, we can. So that's actually a great time to ask that question, because I can show you how to do that. So we hit exit, and we come back to acknowledgement history. So this segues right into the next section of what we have here in the acknowledgement history and the contact log. So in the contact log, we can do the reprinting, and I'll do that in just a second. But I just want to mention here, well, let's go ahead and go to, so for every batch that has been sent or is currently sent for processing, you will get a contact log under recipients. And so if you want to see who you sent a batch to that has been completed or is being emailed out, you can go to recipients, contact log, and you can reprint. So we could reprint everything by select all and download PDF. We could re-email. So we could select just those we want to email and resend email. And we can also reprint envelopes. We don't have to select all. We could just say, I just want to redo this one and download PDF. And that will give us just that single letter. If I had selected multiple, I'd get multiple letters. So,
and it looked like when you hovered over that, there's an edit, so you could go back and say, oh, I put in the wrong thing, or
exactly.
And I can edit that individual one?
Absolutely, yep. So just as we did in step 4, generate acknowledgements, we could put personal notes in and make little tweaks. We can also do that here. So if we had printed one up, the rest of the batch looked fine, and we didn't notice it till, the ED went to go and sign it, and they're like, well, hey, there's a small glitch here. You can go, oh, I can fix that one. And you only have to fix that one and print that one.
Okay.
So what you can also do here is if you realize, okay, I completely messed up this donation. It shouldn't have been in this batch. It was the wrong template. You can select that one and remove from list. So just like the delete option in step 4, here we have the remove from list option. Same thing. That's why I keep saying delete should be called remove from list. So everything you can do in step 4, basically, you can do here.
Now, if you've already sent the email, does it not remember that you sent that email?
It does let you resend the email if you'd like to. So normally you'd only email if they had the communication preference email. So I actually did things kind of strangely by doing a kind of a mixed bag. But email status will also tell you if you had sent it by email. Currently they're pending, meaning they're currently being processed by the email sending service. So if you want to know if you had sent something by email, just check the email status. Mail status will tell you the mail status. So since I had done kind of a mixed bag, you normally wouldn't see this unless you also do the mixed bag kind of thing like we were talking about earlier. So does that make sense now?
Yeah,
okay,
great.
Cool.
Thank you.
So let's go back to acknowledgement history and talk a few things here before we wrap up. So I've just mentioned that under recipients, we get a contact log for all completed batches. We also have a status that tells us where this batch currently resides. If it's been sent and emailed all complete, it'll say sent. If emails are still currently being processed and sent out, it'll be sent for processing. And partially sent means that some things have been sent and some things haven't. So maybe we sent out some of the mail, then went back and added more mails, switched some things from email to mail, and so we still have a few things to be, or the other way around. We sent some emails and then reconfigured and added new email, changed some from mail to email, and so it'll say partially sent. So generally speaking, if you see something like partially sent, you want to go into that batch and finish it up. Saved only means that we're still somewhere at step 4 or earlier. Or actually, no, we're still at step 5 or earlier, and we haven't sent or mail or done printing on any of it. So saved only means you still have some work to be done on it, but sent means it's completed. So this is what you want to see everything be at the end. So one thing I want to mention, that the moment a donation acknowledgement ends up in a batch, it is removed from the pool of acknowledgements. You never have to be concerned that you may send something twice or have it in 2 different batches. The moment it is added to a batch is the moment it is removed from the pool. Also, if you ever find that you've got a batch that you just did completely wrong, you can hit the redo button on that whole batch, and the entire batch will be deleted, and the emails sent, the acknowledgements added back into the pool of acknowledgements to be acknowledged. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up by go ahead and showing you in communication history where Adam B. Ross has an acknowledgement that has been sent out. That is a Google error. Okay, so Adam B. Ross. Oh, I don't know which one it is. I'm pretty certain that Abby Normal has an acknowledgement, so let's try her. If not, then I'll just live with it, but I wanted to show it off. So communication history, and let's see, you should have an old acknowledgement. Donation acknowledgement mail. And currently the status is saved only, but if it had been sent, it would say sent. So as you send out acknowledgements, they will also show up in their communication history. All right. So anybody have any questions about anything with donation acknowledgement today?